The crack of gunfire shattered the morning stillness, sending a flock of startled crows into the air as Prudence Stark's horses reared in panic, their iron-shod hooves pawing wildly at the dusty trail. She had been too absorbed in her thoughts to notice the rattlesnake sunning itself on the road, and now her wagon was careening out of control toward the steep embankment that bordered the eastern approach to Concord, California. It was 1873, and Prudence had staked everything she owned on this journey west. At 24, the Pennsylvania schoolteacher had abandoned her secure but stifling existence after receiving news that her uncle had passed, leaving her his modest homestead near the burgeoning town. The promise of independence and a fresh start had been too tempting to resist, even if it meant traversing half a continent alone. "Whoa, steady," she cried, pulling desperately on the reins, but the damage was done. The right wheel caught on a jutting boulder, and with a sickening lurch, the wagon tipped. Prudence felt herself airborne for a terrifying moment before crashing to the ground as the wagon rolled, pinning her beneath its wooden frame and scattered belongings. The pain was immediate and blinding. She could feel the crushing weight across her lower body, each breath a struggle as dust billowed around her. Prudence's vision swam, the bright California sun piercing through the haze as she fought to remain conscious. "Help," she managed weakly, knowing the futility of her call on this lonely stretch of road. Her uncle's homestead was still miles away, and Concord itself was barely visible in the distance. The irony wasn't lost on her to survive the arduous journey from Pennsylvania only to perish within sight of her destination. Time blurred as she drifted between consciousness and darkness. The sun tracked higher in the sky, beating down mercilessly. Thirst clawed at her throat, and the weight on her legs had long since transformed from sharp pain to a disturbing numbness. The sound of hoofbeats barely registered until they were almost upon her. Prudence forced her eyes open, squinting against the sun to make out the silhouette of a rider approaching from the direction of town. "Hello," she croaked, her voice barely audible. The rider dismounted in one fluid motion, boots hitting the ground with a puff of dust. He approached cautiously, hand resting on the revolver at his hip, a habit born of necessity in these parts. "Madam," the deep voice matched his imposing frame as he knelt beside her, concern evident in his blue eyes as they met hers. "Don't you worry now, I'm going to help you." Samuel Holbrook had not planned to ride this stretch of road that day. As foreman of the neighboring Cross Creek Ranch, his duties rarely took him toward the eastern approach to Concord. But a missing steer had led him farther afield than usual, and now he found himself thanking Providence for the detour. "Water," Prudence whispered, her cracked lips barely able to form the word. Sam uncorked his canteen and gently tipped a small amount between her parched lips. "Easy now," he cautioned. "Too much at once will make you sick." As she sipped gratefully, he assessed the situation with a practiced eye. The wagon had completely overturned with the young woman trapped beneath the frame. Her legs disappeared under the wooden structure, and the contents of the wagon, books, clothing, household items were scattered across the dusty ground. "My name's Sam Holbrook," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I'm going to lift this wagon off you, but first I need to know if you're hurt anywhere else." Prudence swallowed hard. "I don't think so, just my legs. I can't feel them properly." Sam nodded grimly. "That's the circulation being cut off. We need to move quick." He surveyed the wagon again. "When I lift, I need you to pull yourself out if you can." Ready, at her nod, he positioned himself at the edge of the wagon frame, bracing his boots in the dirt and gripping the wooden side. With a deep breath, he summoned all his strength honed by years of ranch work and heaved upward. The wagon groaned and shifted, sweat beaded on his brow as he strained, muscles burning with the effort. For a moment it seemed impossible, then the wagon lifted just enough. "Now," he grunted through clenched teeth. Prudence clawed at the ground, dragging herself forward inch by painful inch until she was clear of the crushing weight. With a controlled movement, Sam lowered the wagon back to the ground, then immediately knelt beside her. Her skirts were torn and dusty, but there was surprisingly little blood. Sam gently probed her legs, watching her face for reactions. "Can you feel this?" he asked, pressing lightly on her calf. "Yes," she winced. "It's coming back now, like pins and needles, but worse." "That's good," he assured her. "Means there's likely no permanent damage." Still, you shouldn't try to stand yet. As feeling returned to her limbs in painful waves, Prudence took the opportunity to study her rescuer. He was tall, with broad shoulders and hands roughened by hard work. His face was sun-weathered but handsome, with laugh lines at the corners of his eyes and a neatly trimmed beard that couldn't quite hide a small scar on his jaw. "You saved my life, Mr. Holbrook," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." He gave her a crooked smile that transformed his serious face. "Sam, please, and no thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same." "Not anyone could have lifted that wagon," Prudence countered. "I'm Prudence Stark, by the way. I was headed to my late uncle's homestead near Concord." Recognition flickered in Sam's eyes. "Robert Stark's place, about 3 miles north of town." "Yes," she said, surprised. "Did you know him?" Sam nodded, settling back on his haunches. "Everyone knew old Bob. Good man, fair neighbor. We were all sorry to hear of his passing." "You're his niece from back east, Pennsylvania," she confirmed. "I was a school teacher there." He glanced at the scattered books that had spilled from her wagon. "That explains the library you're carrying." His expression turned serious as he surveyed the damaged wagon. "I hate to say it, but your wagon axle's broken clean through, and one of your horses has a gash that needs tending." Prudence's heart sank. "So I'm stranded." "Not quite," Sam replied. "My ranch is closer than your uncle's place. We can get you patched up there, see to your horse, and I'll have one of the boys come back for your belongings." He hesitated. "Unless you'd prefer I take you straight to town. There's a doctor." "No," she interrupted, then blushed at her vehemence. "I mean, I don't think I need a doctor. Just some rest if you're certain it's not an imposition." Sam studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Let's try getting you on your feet, slow and careful." With his support, Prudence stood shakily. The pain in her legs was intense but bearable, a good sign, according to Sam. When it was clear she couldn't walk far, he lifted her effortlessly onto his horse. "What about my horses?" she asked, looking at the exhausted animals still harnessed to the broken wagon. "I'll unhitch them and bring them along," Sam assured her, working quickly to free the team. He examined the injured horse's leg, cleaning the wound with water from his canteen and binding it with a handkerchief. He mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist as he took the reins. The other horses followed, tied to Sam's saddle by their leads. As they set off at a gentle pace toward Cross Creek Ranch, Prudence was acutely aware of his solid presence at her back, his breath stirring her hair that had come loose from its pins in the accident. They rode in companionable silence for a time, the rhythmic motion of the horse soothing despite her discomfort. The land around them was beautiful in its rugged way, rolling golden hills dotted with oak trees, so different from the lush green forests of Pennsylvania. "May I ask what brings a school teacher all the way from Pennsylvania to California?" Sam eventually asked. Prudence considered her answer carefully. "Freedom, I suppose. My parents died when I was 16, and I've been making my own way since. Teaching was respectable and secure, but—" She trailed off, finding it difficult to articulate the restlessness that had driven her west. "But it was someone else's idea of your life, not yours," Sam finished for her. She glanced over her shoulder at him, surprised by his perception. "Yes, exactly. When I received word about Uncle Robert's property, it felt like a sign, a chance to build something that was truly mine." Sam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "California's good for fresh starts. That's what brought me here after the war." Before she could inquire further, the ranch appeared ahead of them, a sprawling complex of buildings nestled in a verdant valley, with corrals of horses and cattle grazing on the surrounding hillsides. Even from a distance, Prudence could see it was a prosperous operation. "Welcome to Cross Creek," Sam said as they approached. "It's not fancy, but it's home." Several ranch hands looked up as they rode in, their curious expressions quickly turning to concern when they spotted Prudence. "Everything all right, boss?" called a weathered older man, hurrying over to help. "Found Miss Stark trapped under her wagon east of town, Frank," Sam explained as he dismounted. "She's Robert Stark's niece from back east." He turned to lift Prudence carefully from the saddle. "Frank here's been with Cross Creek longer than anyone. He'll help get you settled while I see to the horses." Frank tipped his hat respectfully. "Miss Stark, sorry about your uncle, he was good folk." "Thank you," Prudence replied, leaning on Sam's arm as her legs trembled beneath her. "Let's get you to the house," Sam said. You need rest and a proper meal. The main house was modest but well-maintained, with a wide porch and simple furnishings that spoke of practicality rather than ostentation. Sam led her to a comfortable chair in what appeared to be a study, then excused himself to arrange for her care. Left alone, Prudence took stock of her situation. Her body ached from the accident, but she was alive thanks to the cowboy's timely arrival and extraordinary strength. What might have happened if he hadn't come along didn't bear thinking about. Sam returned shortly with a gray-haired woman who introduced herself as Mrs. Gannon, the ranch's cook and housekeeper. "Land's sakes, child, you've had quite an ordeal," the woman clucked, examining Prudence with a maternal eye. "Let's get you cleaned up and into some fresh clothes. I've got water heating for a bath and there's stew on the stove." "That's very kind, but I don't want to be a burden," Prudence began. Mrs. Gannon waved away her protests. "Nonsense, we don't get many visitors, especially lady visitors. It'll do this house of men some good to mind their manners for a spell." As the housekeeper helped her to the promised bath, Prudence caught Sam watching her from the hallway, concern evident in his gaze. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them, a connection forged in the crucible of her rescue that neither fully understood yet. The days that followed established a surprising routine. Though Prudence had initially intended to stay only overnight, the damage to her wagon proved more extensive than first thought, requiring parts to be ordered from Sacramento. Her injuries, while not severe, left her sore and in need of rest. Sam insisted she remain at Cross Creek until she was fully recovered and her transportation repaired. "Besides," he added with that disarming smile, "you haven't even seen your uncle's place yet. Might be good to know what you're getting into before you're out there alone." Though she protested that she wasn't helpless, Prudence secretly welcomed the delay. Cross Creek Ranch was a revelation, a well-oiled operation that ran on mutual respect rather than the harsh discipline she'd heard characterized many ranches. Sam was firm but fair with his men, many of whom she learned were veterans like himself who had found purpose in the honest work of the ranch. On her third day, feeling stronger, she joined Sam for a tour of the property. They rode double on his gentle mare, with Prudence seated before him as on the day of her rescue. The proximity was both thrilling and unsettling, his arm occasionally brushing hers as he pointed out features of the land. "Cross Creek's been operating since '49, he explained as they crested a hill overlooking the valley. Old Man Cross struck it rich in the gold fields, then had the sense to invest in land and cattle instead of drinking and gambling it away like most. And now you run it for him?" Prudence asked, turning slightly to see his face. A shadow crossed Sam's expression. "James Cross passed 2 years ago. His son Edward owns it now, but he prefers San Francisco society to ranch life. I handle the day-to-day." Something in his tone suggested there was more to the story, but Prudence didn't press. Instead, she asked about the cattle operations, the challenges of ranching in California, anything to keep him talking in that deep, measured voice that had begun to feature in her dreams. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, they stopped by a creek that gave the ranch its name. Sam helped her dismount and they sat on a fallen log while the horse drank. "I've been thinking about your uncle's place," Sam said after a comfortable silence. "It's good land, but the cabin needs work and farming isn't easy alone." Prudence straightened, her pride pricked. "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Holbrook, and I'm willing to learn." He held up a hand in apology. "I didn't mean to suggest otherwise, just offering to help when I can." "Neighbors look out for each other out here," she softened, realizing he hadn't meant to doubt her capabilities. "I would appreciate any advice. My experience with agriculture is limited to a small vegetable garden back in Pennsylvania." "We can start with the basics," Sam offered. "Soil, water, what grows well in this climate?" His enthusiasm was evident as he described the potential of her uncle's land for orchards, perhaps, or certain crops that thrived in California's unique conditions. As he spoke, Prudence found herself watching the animation in his face, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how his hands sketched shapes in the air to illustrate his points. She had known capable men before, respected colleagues and acquaintances, but none who combined strength and gentleness the way Sam did. The moment shifted when their eyes met and held. Sam's words trailed off mid-sentence, and the air between them seemed to thicken. For an endless second, Prudence thought he might lean forward, close the small distance between them. Her heart hammered in her chest at the possibility. Instead, he cleared his throat and stood abruptly. "We should head back. Mrs. Gannon will have supper waiting." The ride back was quieter, laden with unspoken thoughts. Prudence was confused by her own reaction. She had come west for independence, not to fall under the spell of the first handsome cowboy who crossed her path, even one who had saved her life. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her stomach when Sam's hand accidentally brushed hers as he helped her from the horse at the ranch house. That evening, after a hearty meal with the ranch hands, Sam invited Prudence to join him on the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky, so different from the often cloudy Pennsylvania nights she was accustomed to. "I've arranged to take you to your uncle's place tomorrow," Sam said as they sat in matching rocking chairs, "if you feel up to it." "Yes, I'd like that," she replied, though the prospect filled her with mixed emotions. Seeing the homestead would make her new life real in a way it hadn't been yet, confined as she'd been to the comfortable routine of Cross Creek. Sam seemed to sense her apprehension. "It's natural to be nervous." "New beginnings always are." "Were you nervous, when you came west?" He considered her question, rocking slowly. "Terrified," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "I was 22, had seen too much during the war, and had no clear idea of what I was looking for. Just knew I couldn't stay in Virginia. Yet you found your place here," she observed. "I got lucky." James Cross took a chance on a ragged veteran with more nightmares than skills. His voice held deep gratitude. "Taught me everything I know about ranching, became like a father to me." He paused, then added quietly, "Promised me the ranch one day." Prudence turned to him, surprised by this revelation. "But you said his son inherited it." Sam's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "Edward was in Europe when his father died. By the time he returned, the will couldn't be found." He shrugged, but the casualness seemed forced. "It's water under the bridge now." "That's terribly unfair," Prudence said, indignant on his behalf. "Life often is," he replied simply. "Besides, I still have a good position, a roof over my head. Many veterans fared worse." He changed the subject deftly. "Tell me about your teaching. You must miss your students." Prudence allowed the shift, describing her small schoolhouse in Pennsylvania, the challenges and joys of education. As they talked, the tension from earlier dissolved into comfortable conversation that ranged from books they'd read to places they hoped to see. When Mrs. Gannon eventually called that it was getting late, Prudence was startled to find they had been talking for hours. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said as Sam walked her to the guest room door, "and for everything else. Not many would have been so kind to a stranger." "You're not a stranger anymore, Prudence," he replied softly. The use of her given name sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cool night air. Before she could respond, he bid her good night and strode away down the hall, leaving her to wonder at the complex man who had so unexpectedly entered her life. Morning brought a perfect California day, with clear skies and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. After breakfast, Sam loaded a wagon with supplies, tools, seeds, and provisions he insisted were just neighborly gifts, and they set off for Robert Stark's homestead. The property was smaller than Cross Creek, but beautifully situated, with a natural spring feeding a creek that wound through the land. The cabin itself, however, was more dilapidated than Prudence had anticipated, roof sagging in places, porch steps rotted through, windows clouded with dirt and neglect. "Oh," she breathed, unable to hide her dismay. Sam jumped down from the wagon and offered his hand to help her. "It looks worse than it is," he assured her. "Most of the issues are superficial, the foundation's solid and the walls are sound." Taking a deep breath, Prudence squared her shoulders. "Then we'll just have to fix the rest." Her determination seemed to please him. "That's the spirit. Let's start with a proper look around." They spent the morning assessing the cabin and land. Sam pointed out what needed immediate attention and what could wait, all while teaching Prudence about the property's potential. His knowledge was impressive, but more striking was his ability to see beyond the current state to what could be. "This south-facing slope would be perfect for fruit trees," he explained, gesturing to a gently rising hillside. Apples, maybe some peaches. And here, near the creek, you could plant vegetables that need more water. Prudence tried to absorb it all, but found herself distracted by the man rather than his words. The sunlight caught in his hair, bringing out auburn highlights in the brown, and his rolled-up sleeves revealed forearms corded with muscle. When he smiled at her enthusiasm for a patch of wildflowers, something inside her softened and yielded. They ate a simple lunch under an oak tree, discussing plans for repairs. Sam offered to send some of his men to help with the major work, an offer Prudence initially resisted, but eventually accepted with gratitude. "I want to do as much as I can myself," she insisted. "I didn't come west to be dependent on others." "Independence doesn't mean doing everything alone," Sam countered gently. "Out here, we all rely on each other. That's not weakness, it's survival." As they packed up to return to Cross Creek, Prudence took a final look at what would soon be her home. Despite its flaws, she felt a growing attachment to the place and to the man who was helping her see its possibilities. The next 2 weeks fell into a pattern. Mornings were spent at the homestead, with Sam and a rotating crew of ranch hands tackling the major repairs while Prudence cleaned, planted a small garden, and learned the rhythms of the land. Afternoons often found her helping at Cross Creek, assisting Mrs. Gannon, or even teaching one of the younger ranch hands to read better during rest periods. Evenings were the best part, shared meals followed by conversations on the porch that stretched late into the night. They spoke of everything and nothing, discovering shared values despite their different backgrounds. Sam's respect for her intelligence and determination was evident, never treating her as fragile despite their first meeting. For her part, Prudence found herself increasingly drawn to his quiet strength, his integrity, and the occasional glimpses of vulnerability he allowed her to see, like when he spoke of comrades lost in the war, or his complex feelings about Edward Cross's management of the ranch. It was during one such evening, as they watched a meteor shower streak across the night sky, that something shifted between them. "Make a wish," Sam said as a particularly bright star shot overhead. Prudence closed her eyes briefly, then opened them to find him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What did you wish for?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. "I can't tell you," she replied softly, "or it won't come true." He moved his chair closer to hers, the creak of wood loud in the quiet night. "What if I can guess?" Her heart raced as he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. "Sam," she whispered, uncertain what she meant to say next. He leaned forward, pausing a breath away. "Tell me to stop, and I will." Instead, Prudence closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his answer. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as his hand cradled the back of her neck. When they finally parted, she felt light-headed, as though the ground beneath them had shifted. "I've been wanting to do that since I found you on that road," Sam admitted, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "Even covered in dust and half-conscious, you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen." Prudence laughed softly, "Not the most flattering first impression." "It showed your strength," he countered. "Most people would have given up, but you were fighting to stay conscious to survive." His expression grew serious. "I admire that about you, Prudence, your determination, your courage in coming west alone, starting over." His words touched her deeply. Throughout her life, Prudence had been praised for propriety, for fitting the mold expected of a respectable woman. Sam was the first to value the very qualities others had found concerning her independence, her willingness to chart her own course. "The repairs on your cabin will be finished next week," Sam said after a moment. "Your wagon's fixed too." The reminder of her imminent departure from Cross Creek sent a pang through her chest. "Yes, I suppose it's time I started my new life properly." He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "I was hoping, that is, I wondered if you might consider." He paused, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "Prudence, these weeks with you have been the happiest I've known in a long time." She squeezed his hand encouragingly. "For me as well." "I don't want them to end," he said simply. "I know your independence matters to you, and I would never ask you to give up your dreams, but I thought perhaps we might build something together." He met her eyes directly. "I'm asking if I might court you properly, Prudence Stark." Joy bubbled up inside her, unexpected and overwhelming. Yes, she answered without hesitation. I would like that very much. Their second kiss sealed the promise, longer and deeper than the first. When they finally parted, breathless, Sam rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, he murmured, that I don't intend to court you for long before asking another question entirely. Prudence smiled, her heart full. I should warn you that I might not wait for you to ask. The following days were filled with preparations for her move to the homestead, now transformed by the efforts of Sam and his men. The cabin roof was repaired, the porch rebuilt, windows cleaned, and a fresh coat of whitewash applied to the walls. Inside, the rooms were scrubbed clean, with new curtains sewn by Mrs. Gannon brightening the windows. On the day Prudence was to move in, Sam arrived early, seeming unusually nervous as he helped load her belongings salvaged from the accident and supplemented by generous gifts from the ranch staff into her repaired wagon. I have something to show you before we go, he said, leading her to the stable. Inside, he pointed to a beautiful chestnut mare in one of the stalls. This is Penny, she's yours, Prudence gasped, approaching the horse with wonder. Sam, I can't accept this. She's a gift, he interrupted firmly. From all of us at Cross Creek, a ranch hand needs a good horse, and Penny's gentle but sure-footed. Touched beyond words, Prudence stroked the mare's velvety nose. Thank you, I'll treasure her. At the homestead, they unloaded her belongings together, arranging furniture and supplies until the cabin began to feel like home. As afternoon faded toward evening, Sam built a fire in the hearth while Prudence prepared a simple first meal in her new kitchen. They ate at the scrubbed wooden table, discussing plans for the land and the coming seasons. When Sam grew quiet, seeming distracted, Prudence touched his hand. Is something wrong? He shook his head, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small wooden box. I meant what I said about not courting you long, he began, his voice husky with emotion. I know it's fast, perhaps too fast, but when you know something's right. Prudence's heart hammered as he opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small pearl. It was my mother's, he explained. She gave it to me before she passed, said to save it for someone special. He moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking her trembling hand in his. Prudence Stark, from the moment I lifted that wagon off you, I think my heart knew what my head took longer to realize. I love your courage, your determination, your kind heart. I want to build a life with you, whether on your land, at Cross Creek, or somewhere else entirely. Tears blurred Prudence's vision as he continued. I'm not a wealthy man, but I promise to work every day to be worthy of you. Will you marry me? The answer had been forming in her heart since that first night on the porch, perhaps even since the moment he'd appeared on the dusty road when she needed him most. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Samuel Holbrook, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to take her in his arms. Their kiss was a promise, a beginning. Later, as they sat before the fire making plans for their future, Prudence rested her head against Sam's shoulder. I came west seeking independence, she mused. I never expected to find love as well. Sometimes life gives us what we need, not just what we're looking for, Sam replied, kissing the top of her head. That overturned wagon might have been the luckiest accident of your life. Prudence smiled, thinking of the strange path that had led her here, from Pennsylvania schoolteacher to California homesteader, from solitary traveler to beloved partner. Our life, she corrected gently. And yes, I believe it was. They were married that autumn in Concord, with the townsfolk and ranch hands gathering to celebrate. Mrs. Gannon wept openly, while Frank and the other Cross Creek hands cheered as Sam kissed his bride beneath an arch of autumn flowers. As a wedding gift, Edward Cross, perhaps moved by the romance of their story, or perhaps recognizing what his father had seen in Sam, signed over a portion of Cross Creek Ranch adjacent to Prudence's homestead. Together, they would build something new, combining their lands and their dreams. Their first child, a son, arrived the following summer, named Robert James after both their fathers. He was followed 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth, with Sam's blue eyes and Prudence's determined spirit. As the children grew, so did their property, orchards flourishing on the south-facing slopes, fields of grain waving in the valley, a new and larger home built where the two properties met. On warm evenings, when the day's work was done, Sam and Prudence would often sit on their porch, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set over land that had flourished under their care. Sometimes they would reminisce about that fateful day on the eastern road to concord how chance and courage had brought them together. "Do you ever regret it?" Sam asked once, his arm around her shoulders. "Trading your independence for marriage and children?" Prudence looked up at the man who had lifted not just a wagon but her heart, who had shown her that true partnership strengthened rather than diminished her. "I didn't trade independence," she answered, taking his hand in hers. "I found it with you." And as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky, Samuel Holbrook kissed his wife beneath the same heavens that had witnessed their beginning when she was trapped under her overturned wagon, and the cowboy lifted it off her, changing both their lives forever.